A 1.5-inch scale Allchin Royal Chester traction engine renovation, and this is part 13. And the good news is, in this episode there isn't any painting. Cleaning up the cylinder cover using my Myford ML7R Lathe and refitting the part to the engine. This is followed by starting to make a pair of steering chain fittings. This fancy cap for the end of the cylinder is made from steel, not stainless steel. It's a little bit on the rusty side. The first thing I need to do is remove the piece of heat insulation, which thankfully is not asbestos. The part isn't very well finished on the inside, but that doesn't matter. The outside is well finished, but as you can see, it's a bit rusty and pitted. This is where the Myford ML7R Lathe comes in very useful. The chuck is small, and it's perfect for clamping the part in position as shown. The job starts by using a long piece of wet or dry sandpaper. This keeps my hands away from the rotating chuck. To clean up the front of this part, I've folded the sandpaper as shown, so it's quite a thick pad. Health and safety warning: when doing things like this, be very careful not to actually catch your hand in the chuck. This Myford is only a small lathe, but it really could bite. Using the wet or dry sandpaper dry didn't cut very well, so I sprayed the part with some WD-40, and this made a big difference. When I was young, I could never really figure out the benefits of using sandpaper wet. I got a bit wiser as I got a bit older. Using a lubricant stops the sandpaper from clogging. I finished off the job using a piece of Scotch-Brite, and now it looks like this. Nice and shiny and no longer rusty. I refitted the heat insulation and pressed the newly cleaned up cap onto the end of the cylinder. The cap is held in place by one central bolt, and the threaded hole in the cylinder cover goes all the way into the cylinder, so I use some Loctite 542 on the bolt to avoid any leaks. When fitting things like this, it's very important not to over-tighten the securing bolt, because if you do, the end could become concave and it wouldn't look good. Please be aware that this is a sympathetic renovation, and I don't want it to look like it's got lots of new parts on it. It's not going to be perfect, but it will be much improved from the condition it was in when I received it. One of the steering chains and fittings was missing, but thankfully I still have one steering chain complete with fittings that I can copy. Here I'm checking the thread size, and this is a 7BA nut, which seems to fit. The fixings for the chain are not both the same. The threaded part on this one is shorter than on the other. What I need to know is what the diameter is of the eye part of this fitting. This is going to be quite a fiddly job, but I'm sure it will come out okay in the end. The diameter of the eye part of the fitting is 3/8 of an inch. Very conveniently, in my box of 7BA fixings, I found two pieces of studding that were just the right size. Once I've made the parts, I'll shorten one of these pieces of studding to the same length as the one on screen. I'm going to turn a piece of 3/8 bar in the lathe, but this is stainless steel because it's non-magnetic. Luckily, I found a piece of mild steel. The best way to tell the difference is just to test it with a magnet. And before countless people write in to tell me, yes, I am aware that not all stainless steel is non-magnetic. It doesn't really matter though, I'm not going to use stainless steel. Here's the piece of mild steel, which without more ado I fitted into the chuck of my Boxford lathe. And as always, the first part of the job is to face across the end to square it off. While I was using my magnet to test for stainless steel, it appears to have magnetized this piece of steel very slightly. You can see this by the way the swarf is stuck to it. The next part of the job, as usual, is to centre drill the end. And now the part is looking quite attractive, with a very fancy pattern of magnetised pieces of steel. The hole in the middle of the original fittings is 9/64 of an inch, so I'm drilling this out to 9/64 of an inch as well. I've drilled a hole for a depth of about 1.5 inches. That's because I'm using this round nose tool to shape one end, and then I'm going to use the same round nose tool to shape the other end and part it off. Parting off with round nose tools is not recommended, but it's very convenient as I will end up with a ring that is chamfered at both sides. I should be using lubricant for this job, I know, but it makes a mess of the video and it splatters on my camera too. This was interesting. The parted off component just sat on top of the cutting tool. Quite unusual. This part of the job is really not necessary. I'm going to use the tool at the right angle to square off the front of this part. This of course is going to be the second of the rings, and exactly the same way as I made the first one, I move the round nose tool into the right position and start to part off using it. The heating in the workshop is just beginning to take effect. It's very cold in here. As I'm fat and hairy, I don't normally feel the cold, but I have noticed the older I get, the more I start to feel chilly. In this clip, I'm fitting the first of the parted off rings back into the chuck. I've changed the angle of the tool, and now I'm squaring off the front of it, like you saw me square off the front of the main part of the stock. As I mentioned previously, I don't need to do this, but something inside me makes me do it automatically. When I finish these two rings, I will be further shaping them using a couple of different methods. And for the external front and rear shape of them, I'll be using my 1-inch belt sander, but that's later in the next episode. I won't say anything to give away the next operation. All I will say though is this is a rattle can aerosol cap. And that is it for now. Hypothermia is setting in. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.